Good evening, everyone, and welcome back. Happy New Year. Hope you've had fantastic holidays. This is IKYA Live, and we are back with world news from the spiritual perspective and your premier news program for practical spiritual advice for your everyday life. My name is Andy, and I work as operations manager here at the IKYA Center in snowy and frigidly cold Oslo, Norway. We are very happy to have you with us tonight. We have also a studio audience as well as all of you on YouTube Live. And before we get started, let's go ahead and already now down below like tonight's episode and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And most importantly, perhaps share. Come on, share tonight's episode right now so that other fellow spiritual seekers, family, friends can join us for this both fun and very thought-provoking episode of IKYA Live. Also, jump into social media and share the episode on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We are ikya.official on all channels. All right. Now, to start the new year off right, we are diving into a kind of thought-provoking and also increasingly interesting news topic. As the science has continued to expand on the nature of reality and what it is, and as artificial intelligence also spreads throughout our society, it does increasingly raise the question, what is reality? Is reality real? Or are we really more in a simulation like a computer game? And there is evidence from physics that it maybe is something maybe closer to a simulated computer game. So IKYA and I decided tonight was important to address this topic because he has perhaps the most unique perspective to offer on this really juicy topic. So we're going to dive right in tonight into that question of the nature of reality. And IKYA, we're all wondering, are we actually just living in one big simulation?
The thing is, scientifically, there's actually no real argument against it. And the reason is that as a civilization advances, if you think of like where our computers are already, and what we're able to render. Well, if we go, a few hundred years, even a few thousand years, what about a million years into the future? There is absolutely no way one can have computers that are not able to render or create an artificial reality that is indistinguishable from reality, right? So if that happens, then one will create an artificial world. And part of the program can be laws of nature and see what happens. And at some point, those beings in that simulation may reach a level where they create computers, where they can create simulations, and so on. So it's a very interesting thought experiment. And it's not new. Philosophers, they've always been kind of thinking about this based on where the culture and technology has been at. But as we kind of dive into spiritual work, we discover that, yeah, this has always been part of how we deal with things in spiritual work. That this type of reality is not as real as we think, and it may be real in a different way. And to me, it's interesting that it's taken humans this long to truly, begin to wrap our heads around this concept, because it's now, due to our technology that we can start thinking about this in a rational way. But the thing is, we are living in a simulation, but not a computer-generated simulation. Reality is, the manifested realities outside of you, that is a simulation of consciousness. That is why manifestation exists. So, yeah, that as a model is very close to what's going on. But we need to refine it a bit to understand how the universes work. So we'll kind of like play around with this, and please be active. This is a really fun topic. So, let's come up with all the weird angles you can think of and just, let's see what happens. Now, if you understand that we as pure consciousness, as pure isness, we exist outside space, outside time, outside everything, right? So we are in a state of absolute oneness, which is absolute allness. And there are no manifestation, no experience, nothing, which is everything in one no space, right? It's very difficult for us in this form to relate to that. But if you have that as a starting point, and you also understand spiritually, if we then think of the journey, which is the spiritual evolution of you. Now, we have to use the linear way of thinking to relate to this, but if you can imagine that your starting point is more like a seed, and you're to grow into your full potential, well, that's the state of enlightenment, which is the full both comprehension, understanding, and being in oneness, in full consciousness. Something happens in between, right? And that's the journey. And how can you then journey when there's no space, when there's no experience, no nothing, right? So we need this. And all the different variations of horizontal realities, as we call them, consist of different types of laws of nature, which create different kind of paradigms or matrices through which you can experience and incarnate. So you can have specialized experiences based on your exact point of evolution and the type of karma you need to deal with in order to grow into your next step of spiritual unfoldment. So in that, there are limitless both dimensions and universes, and even in science, they're now beginning to understand and accept that our physical universe is just like one. It's just like one tiny bubble. Our universe, with perhaps trillions of galaxies, they now know at least there are several hundred, billion galaxies. That's a small bubble. And there may be infinite amount of bubbles. Universe is coming and going all the time. And that may be one dimension. And then there may be infinite dimensions. Right? This is where science is going. So it means we have infinite possibilities to incarnate and express, to have any type of experience that we need in order to grow. So if you think of how this reality comes about, it is a set of natural laws in a specific combination, meaning that anything that happens, any impulse, will come into this and will have to become something according to the natural laws. And in other types of dimensions or realities, it will be the same process, but based on a very different type of paradigm. It's just like having different platform or different video games or, different artificial realities. When we think of a simulation, the definition of a simulation is an imitative representation of a process or system that could exist in the real world, right? So it's basically creating renderings of your consciousness because you have no idea what you are, what you're experiencing in this very moment. And that is as far as you've come in your spiritual evolution. And you still have no idea about what you are, who you are, what reality is, like in all of that. So we need to go into each and every kind of particle of our existence and explore it and figure out what's what and how it works. So yes, this is a simulation because it's not the allness. In the allness or absolute oneness, you can't separate anything, right? It's the complete and total summary of everything. And you can't deal with that. Think of you as a person trying to relate to that. It's impossible. And if we then can think of any form of specialized experience, means you need a specialized universe, a specialized set of laws of nature, a specialized way of things to manifest that correlates with how your consciousness works and how your karma operates, and what type of experiences are needed for you to get your karma served in a specific angle for you to get exactly what you need in order to grow. So it's a simulation. Just think of, for instance, if you want to learn how to fly an airplane, you will be hopefully using a simulator, right? That you will be in a simulation and you'll get your training, right? It's specialized. All that thing does is give you the illusion of being in an airplane, right? And today the simulators are so good that you can't really distinguish, your experience from the real thing. So you can practice, right? And you can crash your plane as often as you want to, or as you need to in order to stop doing that, right? And this is what the point of a simulation is, for you to be able to practice and figure things out and become an expert. Because hopefully, as you use the simulation to learn how to fly a plane, you will already know how to fly a plane before you try a real one. Because crashing that will be very costly, and people will die. So it's always, a great benefit for everyone if you try it in a simulation first. And this is what all of this is. It's you learning to work out your karma, your misunderstanding, your illusions. So you're not in the way. So when you're dealing with a higher level of truth, for each time you've already gone through all of these mistakes, and as we know, it goes through the same things over and over and over and over again. Just like learning how to fly a plane, you will crash again and again and again until you don't. And we crash in this reality again and again until we don't. And only then are we ready. And then it's on to the next simulation. So every lifetime you have is specialized, right? Sometimes you're trying to learn how to fly a plane. Sometimes you're trying to learn to do something else entirely. So you will have a specialized environment for that. But it can be difficult to understand because this whole planet is just beings in the somewhat same type of point of evolution, meaning that we need the same type of laws of nature to study. We have somewhat similar karma, right? So there are then billions of beings in that same simulation, but it's still a simulation. And this is how laws of nature works. It's one big machine, and the only purpose is for you to go through the experiences necessary to expand for real and to crash as many times as possible, right? This is why we all go around in life acting like complete idiots, right? Because we're always confronted with what we haven't learned yet. Our weaknesses. Think also, when you want to learn how to fly a plane, what will the teacher try to do? He will manipulate the simulation so that you can kind of train and practice on your weakest points again and again and again. Because when you understand how to do certain things, you don't have to practice that. We move on to something else. So will always be your weakest links. Always be what you haven't understood, like where you fuck up. That's where you need to practice before you can do the real thing. And each level of truth each level of kind of spiritual reality, you need to have worked out your weaknesses, your resistance. Because the consequence, if you haven't, will be very unpleasant. Because for each level, more flow, more divine flow will flow through you, because you will become a more integral part of how the universe works. And if you then stand in the way, if you have too much resistance and that flow will be activated, you will injure yourself, just like you will crash the plane. So we go through these specialized experiences in more ways than you can possibly imagine, so that we may map out and correct every single particle of what we are, who we are, so we can operate in reality. So that's a fun part of this. And this type of model, I think, can help people to understand more of what's really going on. Yes?
So we have a question about maybe it's human nature, but it seems like, and it's typical, like when you're playing a computer game and you're not doing well, it's very easy for the mind or the ego to start blaming the game or the parameters. And it strikes me as the same thing happens often in a spiritual way, that the more you really realize that this is a simulation, it's like, well, whoever made this stupid simulation, they didn't do the rules right, or the parameters suck, or whatever, and I become the victim, right, of the simulation. Like, how do I switch that up so that I don't victimize myself, realizing that this is a simulation?
Well, I think actually when we look at computer games, right, for the most part, if you play a game where you have the game and it's you can't sit there and whine and say, they did this to me, right? The game is set. You are the player. You are responsible. You are the active part. And it's just you and your skill set, right, meeting that artificial world. And your skills will be the determining factor, like, in your success or lack thereof. There's nothing else going on. So I think actually computer games can also help people move out of the victim mindset. Because this is also the interesting thing, that we need to understand that although existence, the manifested existence, is a rendering, is a simulation, it's also a simulator. You are a simulator, which means you are influencing the simulation with your every thought, feeling, action, expression, whatever. This is a co-creation. The laws of nature are actually an extension of consciousness. Going into this may be difficult to grasp, so we'll try to keep it simple. But if you can imagine that there are more dimensions and universes than there are possible numbers. You can incarnate wherever. So whenever individuals incarnate in the same space, it is because they share a lot, because otherwise they will be incarnating somewhere else. So based on that, if we can think how people have a tendency to group based on similar characteristics, right? Similar ways of thinking or interests, it's like that. So when you are in the same type of evolutionary process or spiritual unfoldment, dealing with the same types of karma, that are enough similarities, you will kind of be gravitating towards the same space. And the more similar you are, the closer you will kind of clump together. And at one point, that will become a space. it will become a shared space, because at some point that will be enough to externalize. So how that level of consciousness and evolution operates as a collective space will be interpreted into natural laws. So it always starts with consciousness. And that will then be the paradigm through which now everyone can be experiencing kind of the same thing and interact. But the laws of nature will actually be something that the individuals in that space will be creating and sharing. Now, the question of what is real, in the old days, in the world of science and physics, one believed that there is one outer reality. And when something is real, it's what can be observed in the external world in such a way that nobody needs convincing that it's there. Like, it's an actual objective fact. And now we're starting to realize, also in the world of physics, that it's not like that. One example, because I've always been teaching this, that natural laws will be experienced differently for each individual, but the difference is very slight. One thing that is easy to understand is time, because time is extremely flexible. It's not consistent at all. For instance, one experiment that at some point one will be able to do, and this is also accepted in astrophysics, like in a black hole, time stands still. So if you can imagine that you somehow had a spaceship and you were able to travel, and then you start to travel through a black hole, and move like a tunnel, and you would end up on the other side of it. Now, for you, let's say that would take 1 hour. But observed from here, like outside of it, all of a sudden when you began to enter, you would stand still. And you would move very, very slowly. Most would think that you would stand still because like a generation would pass and you would have moved a few inches. But for you, the whole journey would take 1 hour. But it could be that it would take several hundred years outside of it. This is what time is. It's also interesting that, although it's very slight, when you think of time as a form of dimension. So we have space, right? So when you're sitting still, you're also passing through time, because time moves. But once you start moving, you will actually also move through time faster. So each of us, we're all living on different time. If we all had exact watches, from life to death, one would see that we would have different time. It would move differently. Gravity also decides how fast time moves. This is also why in a black hole time can stand still, because it's an absolute kind of space of gravity. So it means that when an object has kind of more mass, which is the normal way of relating to gravity and gravitation, there are other elements too, but if we just keep it to that, it means that time will move more slowly within that huge object, right? Just like, again, with a black hole, it seems to be standing still from the outside, but actually you're moving through time when there's more mass. Now, it also means that when you have a stronger presence, this is, science is moving in this direction. When you have a strong presence, when you have an expanded level of consciousness, meaning that you are more here, it acts like mass, meaning that you will actually be moving through time slightly faster, but it will be observed as slower, right? So time is not the same. It varies a lot. And so it is with all laws of nature. All laws of nature are extremely flexible. We perceive them the same way because we exist in the same paradigm of how we experience reality. And that's why. So as you expand spiritually, if you reach a very high level of consciousness, natural laws will operate differently because you have stretched into a different type of dimension. So dimension, when we talk about it, it's not just like a separate space. If you just think of it as a kind of bandwidth, octaves, you can, expand and you can contract. So an expanded level of consciousness will be hitting kind of like more strings, meaning that laws of nature will appear differently. So in fact, each and every one of us represent a different dimension, a different type of universe, and a different combination of laws of nature. Although it's very, very, subtle, it's still real. But in spiritual traditions, even on this planet, when people have been training, they begin to experience that laws of nature operate differently, right? From the perspective of normal people, the myth is that, they're able to suspend natural laws, they're able to break them. No, it's simply that they operate in a consciousness where the paradigm of natural laws change. So then they can do things naturally within that paradigm that seem like complete magic to normal people because they are in a more limited paradigm, right? We all do this. And even, for instance, when you move around in your life, time is flexible, gravity is flexible, all these different laws of nature and what you can do will change. And as your consciousness fluctuates, so will the natural laws and the renderings and your interactions will change. This is also why many of you will have any divine experiences, right? Many of you have had experiences that science would call suspension of natural laws. Well, in fact, it's not suspension of natural laws, it's just expansion and flexibility. It's completely natural. But this is a fun thing about relating to life and understanding it as a simulation, right? You are influencing what kind of paradigm, what set of natural laws, what kind of source code you're using so you can kind of reprogram the video game. If you think of artificial intelligence, it is like the game is learning from you while you're playing, right? That is kind of how it works. So the consciousness of the universe will also learn from you. And that can also change the paradigm and the combination of natural laws and how they operate.
We have a question in the audience.
Hello. Okay, so I wonder, as this simulation and this game is, full of contrast and this learning experience, is that the point of it, to expand and the universe expanding, or is there a point beside that?
Right. No, it's actually just the effect. If you think of the expansion of the universe, that this little bubble that our universe is, that's just a consequence of expansion of consciousness. And the fun thing is that the expansion of this universe, it's from everywhere at the same time. from a normally linear brain, it's easy to think that it has to have a middle point and then it expands from there. It is expanding from everywhere at the same time, just like consciousness. So all expansion is connected to expansion of consciousness. That comes first. And the rendering and the space will have to reflect that. And at some point, it's done and it will collapse. Just like at some point when you are in a space, you've learned, right? You have crashed the plane enough times and now you know how to fly. Okay, move on. You don't need the simulation anymore. Then you do the real thing, right? So the point is to dissolve the distance between your subjective individual consciousness and oneness. That is the journey, that is the process. That is the only point of anything ever. It is the only point of any of the universes and dimensions and combinations, and everything we do when we are in divine service is to facilitate that. It's the only thing that ever happens. And the rest is, people crashing their planes in the simulation. Right? But it's just the learning process of how we can expand and then master that. So the point is a natural unfoldment of what you are truly. Right? And because you don't know, you're searching for it. But as a spiritual being, you already have it in you that that's what you do. You already know. We all know. Every life form, no matter what level, it will always stretch for more. Because we know that in that process, we also expand spiritually. Right? So all life is about expansion. So we have expansion also meaning the evolution of life biologically, going from, minerals to one-celled life forms, and then we go through the whole thing to what we go through in a lifetime. We grow, expand, everything grows. So through that, we expand and get closer to who we are. Right? Spiritually, it's like we connect with it. It's in us. What is it that pushes or drives or moves a seed from when it hits soil, gets water and sunlight, at some point it will become a tree. What's the drive? Right? And so it is within us. That is what nature is. So as beings, we don't stop until we reach the full enlightenment. And I always say it's inevitable. But the journey is longer than most humans would like to relate to. If we can think that what we think is the full journey, you do that several billion times. Because in each aspect of what you are specialized, and we need all aspects. We need to incarnate in all dimensions, all types of universes to understand the fullness of what is. And that's, again, why we need specialized experiences. And it works. So it's so important that we kind of play with this model, and that we also play with life, and that we don't take it too seriously, because there is no reason why we really should take it seriously. It is understanding that, I said, the world outside of you is a rendering of your exact point of evolution, your exact consciousness. And it will contain the information and experiments and practices that you need in order to grow and expand. So just by living, you are growing. You can't stop it from happening. The thing is, as we start to wake up spiritually, we have the thought, this is actually happening. Can I influence it? Can I make it go faster? What can I do? Instead of just crashing the plane, not understanding that, what's the point beyond crashing it? We start to realize, am I actually here to learn how to fly a plane? Because until then, it's just like a button for a flap, this is blah, blah, and you don't see it. But at some point, you begin connecting the dots, and oh, maybe I'm learning how to fly a plane, and then you will aim for it. So in all our processes, there is growth, and we get better, and we do expand, and we move into higher consciousness. As I tell everyone, you know, you're here as a human, you're not here as a fly, and you have no idea how that happened, right? So growth, evolution is inevitable. Therefore, it's important to not create fear stories. I know human religions are so full of do this or else, right? Humans love threats. They love that thought in the story. If you don't do this, then everything will, you know, life is not like that. It just moves on. So the simulation works because we go through all of this, and we can crash and burn as many times as we want to, but at some point we get interested in learning. And that's when the spiritual awakening happens, right? And then we're, wow, can I actually get good at something? Can I, you know? And then we start to realize, oh, right, this I'm practicing so I can do the real thing, right? And we begin not only to connect the dots, but we begin to move in the karmic processes that we reached a level where we're allowed to fly airplanes. And we say, all right, oh, so this is not just about flying airplanes, it's about all the other things, all the other simulations I'm in as well. It has a point. So, you know, we slowly move into the understanding that everything matters, everything is about educating us, bringing us to the level of expertise we can deal with reality for real. So it happens organically, right? It's not a competition, and you, as I always tell people, you can't fake it, right? No one will let you fly an airplane for real for as long as you crash in the simulation. It doesn't matter, no one will be convinced, right? You can try to sell it, but no one will buy it because it will be irresponsible. So, you know, this is also why it's safe. You know, nothing here really matters except you, your experience. And this is also, I think, what is fun about humans starting to relate to artificial realities is that the very question, what is real, right, and why is it real, becomes part of how we think. Because when we can have real experiences in artificial realities, right? Just like online, in games, whatever, your emotions are real. Your brain cannot necessarily differentiate between artificial experiences and real ones because it's happening in you, right? And all of this is part of expanding the human way of thinking. And it will help humans pass this very kind of flat focus and approach to reality, believing that is one objective reality and that's the one we're all experiencing. Understanding it's the opposite. It's just because we happen to gravitate towards each other and create one space based on common denominators. Doesn't mean that that is the official version and that things are not more flexible. So through creating artificial worlds, enabling us to have real experiences beyond what is possible in the external world, right? We can create over time artificial spaces that are so much more complex, that can be specialized, that can highlight certain things, stimulate certain emotions in ways that are not possible here, right? We will learn to appreciate the variation of different types of reality, and we will not see them as less valuable because we realize that it's what it does to us, right? What's happening within us when we're meeting these different forms and different spaces. So we will then be more intelligent around how we deal with this space, right? Because the weird thing is, it doesn't matter at all but everything matters, right? Because this is where you study, right? So again, just like in the airplane simulation, again, it doesn't matter because nobody's dying, right? You're not crashing for real, but it matters because you need to learn precision. You need to do it right, right? So it matters, but at the same time it doesn't, right? And it's, as humans can begin to understand this, we can begin to appreciate living here and be less scared, right? There is no judgment, right? If you crash the plane, well, game over, start again. There's no judgment. Nothing dangerous can ever happen. Because it's all about the unfoldment of what we truly are and the discovery of ourselves and reality, kind of beyond our collective experience of it.
Well, the classic question that IKYA raises on YouTube around that is that naturally, if it doesn't matter, then I can basically do whatever I want, right? I can crash as many times as I want. I can destroy the world. It doesn't really matter. Or does it?
Well, again, back to the airplane simulation. You can do that, but okay, you do that again and again, and then it will start, why am I just doing that? Because you will, somewhere inside of you, understand that you were there to learn how to fly a plane. If you just crash it again and again, the instructor will ask you, what's your motivation here? Like, why, So it still matters. It matters even more. And that's the thing. Because when we don't understand this as a simulation, we think that matters in itself is so important that if we fail, it's done. Because we're behaving as if we're practicing in a real airplane. We're not. This is the safe version. This is the child-proofed reality. Right? But it has direction and purpose. So it can take away the fear. It can take away the kind of judgment and hate and limitation, so we can actually try things out and learn. Right? And this is why it matters more when we understand the purpose of the horizontal realities. We're here to unfold, we should not limit ourselves. Try things, do things. Right? Because you're not doing it in the absolute reality. It has no real consequences except for, sure, your body can die, you'll get a new one. But it has no real kind of spiritual consequence because you do it until you figure it out. And we're all here to help, right? I'm an instructor. Like everyone in service, we're instructors. It's what we're trying to do. It's assist you to get the most out of your time in the simulation and also learn how to influence it, how to co-create, how to play with it, right? So you can learn to be completely free from all fear and embrace the experience and understand that it's here for you to practice and train until you are ready. Right? So we should spend our time wisely. And we should aim for that kind of level in ourselves where we are ready for the real thing.
Such a great topic. We have another question from the audience.
Yeah, back to the start with the outside of the space and time, a point of view, if it's correct or not. Does that mean there are like infinite points between outside space and time and, like, for example, this level here, like between that there are like infinite levels, or what do you call it, of consciousness? And
Yes.
number two, is there Is there like a certain point of intersection where we like can allow other levels of consciousness influence our three-dimensional lives, and how can we like access that and allow that to influence our lives here and now?
Right. Okay. Let me do the last part first, okay? Because it's both simple and complicated at the same time, so bear with me. We have to touch on the string theory, okay? People talk about it a lot without really understanding what it is. Now, I'll try to explain it in a simple way so we can use that as a way to access this question, because it's really interesting. Now, if we start with particles in the real world, like particles that are observable, they will normally be seen as dots, right? But under kind of extreme microscopes, you will see that they are like almost like rubber bands. There are strings. And one can observe them as little kind of maggots or little kind of rubber bands, okay? And how they move will determine what type of particle they are. So it's the same thing that can be in different states. So they can be a quark, electron, neutrino, and other kind of variations with basically how do they appear, right? But they are strings, they're not dots. But here's where it gets interesting. It's really information vibrating. And one can think of that, it's vibration. And at the same time, like as one understands, a particle can be in different spaces at the same time, the same particle. Why? Think of it as sound. This is a way of understanding it for our human brains. Sound, the same sound can be in different rooms at the same time, right? It can be heard in different rooms at the same time. So vibration, when we think of vibration as information, it can then manifest and be something that can be experienced in different kind of dimensions and spaces at the same time, just like you can fill your whole house with the same piece of music. So these strings can be in many different places at the same time, more that it's flowing through many different types of reality at the same time based on the laws of nature. If we then think of each type of dimension as a paradigm, and if we think of a paradigm as a combination, like a source code combination of laws of nature in a certain ratio, right? So maybe there are like 1,000 different laws of nature, and here we have like, 10 of them in a certain combination. You could take the same laws of nature in a different ratio and everything will change, right? So you have different spaces. And for spaces to be connected, they need to have some of the same. I'm oversimplifying, so if you're a physicist, don't shoot me. I'm just trying to make a point here. If we have the same kind of law of nature as a variable in different dimensions or spaces, that becomes an access point. If then you have a string that operates through that natural law. So we have many different kind of sets of strings. And we also have strings of consciousness. Now, so if we can imagine that, we can also use the example of colors. If we take the color red, the color red can appear in many different spaces and dimensions, right? But then if you have something that is red, that will resonate in all the dimensions and spaces where red exists as a concept. And this is where it will appear. It will not appear in spaces where red does not exist. Just like sound, right? It's about resonance. So when you vibrate something and it exists in all the dimensions and universes where that particular vibration or that color exists, it will appear in that space. And so will you. So think of you as a spiritual being, as soul, containing millions of different strings. So when you have different spaces with different combination laws of nature, what you are as strings and what you will study, when they vibrate, they can only appear in the dimensions and spaces and places where your strings will resonate. That is how you incarnate. So we incarnate in so many different ways. Now the physics behind it is complex, and once you understand it fully and you can observe it, it's like, duh. You know, it's very simple once you get it. But it can be mind-boggling to try to understand the complexity of different kind of forms of string and paradigms and how all of this works. But if you then also can understand that a space, back to her question, that a space will vibrate and pulsate based on everyone present in it, right? Because think of it like when you incarnate into space and everyone coming there is because their strings will kind of resonate in that space. Now, if you expand your awareness, if you think that everyone on this planet suddenly would expand in consciousness, not a little but a lot, all of a sudden, the very paradigm would also expand. Meaning that all of a sudden, this would be a different dimension. So if you think of, you know, just like radio channels, they're like infinite dimensions. And they're kind of like just like that as an idea, just so we can deal with it, okay? So if you have a space here and we are here, when we start to expand, we're starting to expand into that space. But only what correlates with then the kind of extra colors that we have obtained, only that part of the next kind of dimension are we able to experience. Okay? So, if the next dimension has 1,000 colors that are very different from the ones we have, but the expansion means that all of a sudden we have access to 2 more. That's been part of our palette now. Those 2 also vibrates in that dimension, and all of a sudden it's an overlap. Now, it's important to understand that we all, in our consciousness, we move into higher consciousness, lower consciousness, this or that. We have mood swings with this, things happen, right? And we all do. All life forms do. So it means that our consciousness and our paradigm is not fixed. It moves organically, meaning that we're flowing into other dimensions all the time, and other dimensions are flowing into ours all the time. That happens collectively, but on an individual level, it's even more fun because your individual consciousness and your expansion and the colors that you vibrate will determine what type of dimension and space you are connected to, even through this form. So if you expand as a human being in your consciousness, all of a sudden, you will experience things beyond this world. This is common. We all do it, right? But because in physics, up till recently, we had like the misunderstanding that there is one kind of fixed objective outer reality. Now we know that's not true at all. It's all pulsating, meaning that you are in fact your own dimension. And your consciousness and everything that happens in you will change what you are as a paradigm. So you can flow into different realities. Other realities can flow into you, and it's happening all the time. This is also why when we are in spiritual work, we start experiencing things beyond this collective definition of the world. It's completely natural. It happens to everyone. And then, what is then frustrating is that a human brain is trying to interpret it, meaning that in the beginning it's just bullshit, because we're not interpreting it based on what it actually is, but based on what would this mean if it happened within the collective paradigm that I've already accepted that's in my genetics, in my brain. So then we turn it into all sorts of weird things. And that's fine. As we go deeper into spiritual work, we will refine ourselves. We will train ourselves. We are able then to relate to what we connect with, based on, like, closer to what it is, not based on what it means in this dimension, right? That takes time. And if you've been part of spiritual work for a long time, you know what I'm talking about. We are kind of polishing away a lot of our kind of misunderstandings, right? So in the beginning, we create a lot of phenomena, belief systems, all these beings, and for some reason, everything we experience will completely be in harmony with what we believe, right? This is a sign that it's our own brains, right? Taking something and turning it into what we can understand. So there are experiments done. For instance, when you have, there was a scientist who developed a helmet, a fun helmet, basically sending different kind of waves through the brain. And people will sit in darkness, and 80% would have deep spiritual experiences, because it will kind of activate the brain to those kind of waves, right? So they would all have experiences based on their belief systems, right? So to Christians, they would have experiences of Mother Mary and Jesus, and others would have, like, based on their own belief systems, because it's the brain interpreting. And people who are more into spirituality, they will just feel oneness with the universe, all of that, because it's simply tuned the brain into that state, and then it's still a matter of the brain interpreting. So there's a lot of that, but it is important to understand that this reality is organically pulsating and breathing and changing, and your brain will normally filter out most of it, right? Because when you have anomalies, your brain already knows, no, that is not part of how I render my experience. So even what is actually happening around you is not what your brain is stitching together to produce your personal experience of it, right? So part of spiritual expansion is also retraining the brain to let more information flow through your filters, right? So we are in contact with other forms of kind of dimension and existence and beings all the time. And the more we expand, the more work we do, the more we experience, right? But it takes time to go through the process of filtering out all the bullshit, right? And it's often the people who are quite inexperienced, those are the ones with the biggest claims, you know? They make up all sorts of things, and it's fine, right? But at one point, you begin to mature, and you start to understand more about what's going on, and then you're able to kind of modulate how you relate to these expansions and what you also come into contact with. And it becomes more and more kind of real. What was the first part again?
Are there infinite points of perspective
Yes.
between the
Yes.
place outside of space and
Yes.
time? And
Now, the thing is, like, the answer to that is looking at a rainbow. How many colors are there in a rainbow? When you go back a few hundred years, people just saw 3 colors. All over the world, it was just 3 colors. When you look at paintings, 3 colors. Because one hadn't defined the other ones. And now we have, is it 7? That's just based on definition. And the thing is also, what's fun is that we all see a different rainbow based on how light actually hits us and how we interpret that. But if you think there is a seamlessness, right? It's how we define, this is that color. But what about the in-between colors? right? For instance, it's interesting when it comes to, in our culture, we distinguish red and pink. Pink is just like light red. We have blue and we have light blue. In some cultures, that's a separate color. It's azure, for instance, or like something else, but it's a definitions. Maybe when we look at the rainbow a few generations from here, maybe they see 20 colors. Maybe at some point we will see 200. Maybe at some point we will see 14 million. Because it's seamless. It's just how we divide and how we define. And this is how it is. If something is seamless, and it's simply based on the combination of strings, it's infinite possibilities. And some of them will represent a kind of lower vibration, just like on a piano, right? But just like on a piano, you need all of it. It's not like when you're an excellent piano player, you will just play like up there. And this is what we often imagine in spiritual work, right? The best piano player would just play the higher notes. If you're really good, it's just that one. It's just silly. You're able to play on the whole instrument to create music with everything. It's expansion. So it's going in all directions and learning how to play the fucking piano, right? So the belief systems about like higher frequency is better, it's not how it is. It's how you master playing the instrument and being in the universes and understanding how to be and how to co-create with all of it. So because like everything in existence, all the possibilities have to represent the full spectrum of what is. You have the deepest to the highest and combinations. So you will have realities that are based on the lowest and the highest and all combinations of everything. And we just gravitate and incarnate into the different spaces and realities based on the type of experience we want to have, based on exact point of evolution and karma. And as we grow spiritually, we choose our video games ourselves, right? I want to play that game because I want to do that. I want that avatar. And we play because we get the point, right? So we become more of someone creating the simulation. We become part of the simulator more than living inside a simulation, because we understand that, oh, right, the simulation is actually learning. It's adapting also to what I'm doing. So it means I can co-create, right? So the more we grow, the more we take part in the kind of programming, right? So the whole thing is extremely organic, but it is, the vastness of it is far beyond what the human brain can possibly imagine. And that's why it's so fun, right? But through that, it's also as a human to understand how specialized this experience is, this planet, your body, your life, right? How specialized it actually is and how valuable and unique it is, because we have a tendency to take our lives for granted. The more we understand the vastness and the infinite possibilities, and we incarnate into what we are, even in an incarnated form, we begin to appreciate it, right? And that's why I say we see it as it doesn't matter, and it matters even more, right? Because it's an absolute, precise rendering of our point of evolution and consciousness. And what's happening in our life will be the karma that we need to work on in order to grow, nothing else, right? And that's the beauty of it, right? And we need to learn to appreciate this and appreciate the level of tailoring, because it is absolute.
All right, we've got questions all over the place. A fundamental one from Liselotte on YouTube was, if this is a rendering of consciousness, what is the difference between Atma, soul, spirit, and consciousness?
Consciousness is only possible through something. Now, consciousness is limited. So, If we can understand that as soul, or Atma as we often call it, we exist outside manifested existence, right? We exist outside the game, right? Okay, outside the simulation. But the only way to experience is to be in the simulation. So, consciousness is the awareness that we have being in a combination of factors and in a paradigm, meaning that in your body as a person, that consciousness that you are will not be you as soul or Atma. It will also be a fractalization of that. So it is when you as spirit, soul, when you are attached to a form, to a space, that immediately becomes conscious. So if you think of it, it's like the filtered down and simplified version of what you are as soul, connected to a form and a paradigm, and then you experiencing through it and being able to also kind of relate to it in a kind of in a cohesive way. So it's therefore a small part, a specialized kind of version of what you are fully, being connected and attached to whatever form and universe you are in. So that becomes kind of a bubble, and that will also dissolve once the form is gone. Then that consciousness will also dissolve. And still, kind of you as Atma or soul, that's kind of where it ends up. That because it's ultimately it's you building your own expansion of consciousness, becoming more aware. And often what I say is that if you can think of soul does not really have consciousness in and of itself. Consciousness is only possible through manifested realities. So if you can think of consciousness basically is something that you're building. It's the conclusion and the understanding and the I-ness, all of that you build through experiences and through going through all of these renderings and simulations. And over time, that consciousness will become a replica of the entire existence. So you have an awareness as a being of everything in everything. So it's like when that becomes complete, when that consciousness becomes the same as oneness, that is, if you think, that's the biggest bubble. And when that is complete, that also dissolves, because then you don't need it anymore. Because even consciousness is a simulation of God. But you're building it until it replicates. Just like any simulation, right? Is a replication. It's an imitation to kind of mimic and interact with something that could be real. So that's what we're doing. And we're therefore building ourselves and having an actual awareness. It's the only way soul can become aware. It's through this. So the whole existence basically is the language where you as soul or Atma, when you are in dialogue with oneness or God or whatever you want to call it, this is the language. This is the discussion. This is how you grow into understanding until it's complete. So it's just that.
Okay, another fundamental question from Tobin on YouTube is, okay, this is a training simulation. What happens once we're ready to fly the airplane, quote unquote, for real?
Right. Understand that that process happens billions of times. It's not just one. It's like thinking that you are to learn everything that one could possibly learn anywhere in the entire existence in all time. And each process is specialized. So it's that. So the thing is, once you understand, then you relate to the real thing, which is beyond manifestation. And that's the whole thing. The true reality is outside manifested existence. But then you are in tune with it. It's very difficult to explain something outside manifested existence. So everything I say will be kind of bullshit in a way, but still I'm just trying to make you understand in the way that the human brain can relate to. So it's being able to vibrate it, being able to be it. So everything we do, everything we learn, just like people, right? It does something to us. When you look at yourself as a person today compared to who you were 10 years ago, you have hopefully learned and matured, right? And you can look, yes, I'm more mature, I'm more me. Okay, pinpoint exactly what that is. It's impossible, right? It's just like you are more you. It's that. And if you can think of that process being what you do again and again in different ways until what you are as soul or Atma is complete, then you just are it. You are oneness. You are in complete harmony with what we may call God or whatever, right? It's that. So you don't do it. You can do from it, which when we then operate in these worlds, we're still in harmony with what is. We're still in harmony with oneness, because it's who we are now. Just like, you know, whatever experience you go through as a human, it becomes who you are. So once we've gone through that full journey, it's simply who we are, and we understand how to be in harmony with the Absolute at all times. And then we can be anywhere, but we're still in harmony, because we do not relate to the outer world anymore in the same way. So it's very simple, right? But the journey is long.
All right, and then last one from online, I think we have some in the audience as well. Leo in Los Angeles, he says, you've mentioned in the past that we all belong to different groups or cultures or spiritual clusters, some of which also manage this planet. If our true existence is in nothingness, where do we go when we die? Do we go back to our family, our culture, our cluster? Do we go back to nothingness before we incarnate again in a different reality? Is it like the Matrix and we come out into some like god-awful sewer, you know, when we come out of our incarnation?
Right. Now, the easy way to explain this is the concept of fractalization. If you can think of, if you consist of, you know, let's say, 10 million strings, right? And you think of them as like fiber optic cables, like thin, like hair thin fiber optic cables, and you have them all like that, right? And then you start splitting them up, just like a tree. So first you have like thicker branches, thinner, until you have one. And they're all specialized. So if you think of an incarnation as, okay, that's the end of one cable. So what happens when that has been activated, right? It just moves to the kind of joint above it, because that is basically the experience. So it's like when you learn how to play the piano, in the beginning you use one finger and then you use one hand or both hands. Where does it go? Right? The fingers have no idea. It's the same thing. So it's like when you are this person, there is an element of you being a finger. Some of you, of course, being the middle finger, but, not always, but often. But it's like also understanding that there are elements of how you, in higher consciousness, where you operate maybe several lifetimes at the same time, because in that consciousness, you operate differently. So basically like playing the piano. And you are then aware of the musical piece you're playing. And then in this lifetime, you just do that, and then that happens. That is completely random and abrupt. It only makes sense when it's combined with other expressions in the higher consciousness, where all of a sudden, oh, right, it's different fingers doing different things. And it's music that represents your consciousness and vibration. So it's kind of like that, right? So when we are in a form, the brain and the kind of individual consciousness of the body is not the only thing going on. And this is also when we do spiritual work and spiritual practices, we begin to connect more with a player. Right? So we can then understand, instead of fighting it, it's like the finger wants to do this. I think I want to push that. No, it's, you know, we're trying to play here. So it's also then learning to be in harmony with it. And over time, you can hear the music, you can sense it, you can feel that flow. So although you're just one finger, you start relating to what's happening, right? So with expansion comes more of that, and you connect more with the player, and you let the player come through, which is you. In a higher version, being able to do more. And then instead of just having these very specialized experiences, often you work with several specialized experiences at the same time. Just like you as a human, often you're able to do several things at the same time. You can breathe, you know, you can feel, you can sit, you can eat, you can talk, all that at the same time, right? It's just natural. So in a higher consciousness, you can deal with more at the same time, which from this perspective can sound like, how can you do that? But at that level, it's natural. So there is this exchange and interaction where you are both a finger and part of a hand and part of the player, right? And these represents also different levels of consciousness and, again, different levels of fractalization. But it's all one organism. So ultimately, this happens. So even the player is a finger in a greater hand, connected to a player that is then a finger in an even greater hand. And it continues until the fullness and the totality of what you are. And then Atma, or soul, is the player on top. Learning like through all of this at the same time in a non-time, because as you'll learn today, time does not really exist. It's part of the space. It's flexible. So it's one expression. It's one breath. Right? But in a highly fractalized form, you don't really understand it. But as we expand spiritually, we begin to connect more and more to that. And this is part of when we feel oneness. It's that we connect more to the greater body that we belong to.
All right, so then the film Men in Black got it right. We're all just playing bocce ball with with each other in the sky.
Kind of.
All right, we've got a question in the audience.
Yes. So I know so deeply it is a simulation, and that I am creating the simulation too, but I find it boring in a way, because I've always known this, and I see the magic and I see the ascension and everything, but me knowing so deeply that it is all fake, I kind of struggle to find the realness and like the juiciness of this life, because it is a game. So how can I find the joy of, I know this is fake, but it's so fun to play this game anyway?
Right. I completely understand where you're coming from, and most people in spiritual awakening experience the same thing. Because it's understanding that because it's fake, it's real. As I said, what you are learning is real. Your expansion is real. Your skills are real. What is happening to you through all manifestations, that is real. So we can become more real by understanding that this is not. Because what's the point of it? Right, it's the unfoldment of me. It's me building my skills. It's me being in this active dialogue, taking responsibility and doing that. So we're learning that, yes, this is just like in school, right? We're doing experiments, we're learning. That's not the real world, but it's still the real world. It's preparing you for it. So the skills you build are real. The expansion of consciousness is real, and it's just figuring out new ways, new angles. And then, what is the point of it? Right? As I said, when you build skills, when it comes to the full spiritual journey, think of what you are. As soul's Atma is completely unique. There's only one of you. And the point of all of this is for that to become available to oneness. And then that color being available as part of the paradigm in all universes. And that's what true co-creation is. So we also learn whenever we develop something in ourselves, whenever we have a realization, with it, yeah, I've accessed truth. Well, you are to apply it, because that's how you change the premise, how you can influence the laws of nature. You have to apply it and see, how can I do things differently? And when you do, then you will feel joy, because that connects all the way up to the very top of your fractal tree. Because then you are in purpose. Because we unfold so that what we are can then become an integral part of existence. It will become available. We will still be the ones kind of managing that, because that's who we are. But we then have a finger, in every instrument, in every universe, doing that. So this is what we're practicing also in the lifetime. Once we have learned something, life says, okay, show me. Use it, because you're the only one who can do it. This is also why I said when people say, oh, universe, please use me. No, use yourself. That's part of the learning. We have to be the ones applying what we're vibrating, applying our insights, because we have something unique, right? We have an angle, something that has not existed before. We are the one who will have to apply it in an intelligent way, in such a way that it creates growth in all life around us. So what becomes boring is when we realize, all right, more me, been there, done that. When it's about you, it will feel dead. In a process of awakening, it's only when you can create life around you. It's that. So what kind of tickles your fancy will change. Because we're so used in survival that it's all about us. Me, 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 me. And when we start waking up, we connect with life, and then we realize that's boring. But everything we know as a life form is how I can survive. More of me, more of me. And it simply gets boring, and this is also what you're experiencing, because you make it about you. When you say, yeah, use what you've learned to stimulate growth and healing and expansion in life around you. That's also part of the simulation. This is why we can exist in the same simulation and yet operate in very different levels of consciousness, because we do different things. Again, some people will live inside a simulation. Some people will be the simulators, right? And it's that. So where you are, that is the path forward. It's not what does something to you. You need to learn to apply every insight, every vibration, everything you think you know, because you can only for sure understand that it's real. I have actually understood something if you're able to apply it, and the result is growth. Because then it works in the real world. If it doesn't work, then we're still off. Right? A real insight will be in harmony, and therefore will be correct. and it will then stimulate growth and healing faster than if you just leave it to do whatever it's doing. And it's that. And over time in awakening, that takes over. And we begin to realize, right, it's one thing that I have this epiphany. I've understood something, but does it work? Am I able to inject it into different settings, different spaces, different individuals, and it will actually work? Only then is it truth. Right? And it's moving into that mindset and that part of the practice. Right? So that will take care of it. Once you kind of understand how to do it, and when you're able to also make assessments about what results you're getting. Right? Because it has to be growth and healing beyond what would happen if you were not there. And you have to figure out how to do it in a way that does not disturb, that is not about you, but it's simply about a physics experiment. Have I actually understood this principle or not? Right? And that becomes so much fun. Because once you do, and you can do it on a micro level, well, then you do it in like a bigger organic like level or setting, and it just expands. So when individuals and beings in higher consciousness, when they take part in still adjusting planets and all that, it's still them practicing. Have I understood this correctly? It's always about creating growth, because that changes the very kind of paradigm. It changes the simulation for the better, so that others may have better results. Right? So this never ends. But that is what you need to experiment with, and you will figure it out, because the rest is obviously done.
Since Back to the Future Part 4 is coming this year, Aki asked a very important question about time travel. If this is a simulation, can we travel around in time? Can I incarnate simultaneously in different times and know about it? What happened? So tell us a little bit about that. And are all times available simultaneously?
You cannot separate time from the individual experiencing it, because the individual is creating time. So everything is available, but it depends on the paradigm. It depends on the combination of laws of nature and consciousness, right? What type of space you're in and how time operates and all of that. So in a way, time travel is both possible and impossible at the same time. Because when you are locked to your own timeline, right? And other people are in theirs. If you think of yourself as a black hole, you will still experience things as normal, while other people will experience a very different type of timeline, right? It's that, not as extreme, but this is what we all experience. So we're kind of locked to that because time is a consequence. So the easiest way to travel in time is to then change the premise, right? If we can think of even each collective space will have a kind of collective timeline. That is the kind of default. If you shift to a different dimension, time may be very different. So you can move back and forth and up and down. But in a way, you can't go back in time. You can observe it. So if you think of something happening, well, that actually creates an imprint. So if you think of, I've explained this principle before, if you think of like a film being made, in the old days when you have film, each, you had 24 frames a second, and everything's continuously being filmed, so everything is forever. And one knows today, also in physics, that everything that ever happens is stored. Particles store everything. So everything that ever happens is stored in the universe. So think of frame by frame. So I mean, well, once that is filmed, it's there. You can go back and look at it, but you can't change it. Right? You can't interact with it. You can create some kind of virtual experience of it where you can go into it, but it's done. So everything moves forward because everything is kind of interwoven. You cannot go kind of back in time in that way without kind of destroying the whole universe. And so the concept is impossible. So think of it like it's a constant film. Every fraction of a second there's a new frame. That is forever. So time travel will be going back and observing. You can't change it. You can only change the time travel that we're in, because we're moving through time right now. So we're all time travelers as time moves and new frames are being made every second. So it's more important to like, what part are you playing? When every moment is forever, what's your contribution? Are you like extra in the corner, just waiting to go home? Are you actually, doing something? Each frame is forever. That's where we should be concerned, right? This very moment, our level of presence, what we are creating, how we are utilizing all the opportunities, because this very moment is what we can change. Only this moment. And think of all the effort we would have to try to figure out how to go back in time and fix something. Fix it now. Make better choices in this moment, in this moment, in this moment, in this moment. You always have the opportunity. It's so much easier to just sit there and fantasize about the past or the future. It's this moment. This is where you can influence everything. This is where you are co-creating. What are you bringing? What you're actually doing. Each moment lasts forever. Once it's filmed, once that frame is taken, it's done. This is why presence is so important. Be present in yourself and to yourself. Be present in life and to life. Make the most out of everything, all the time. Right? This is also how you expand the simulation, how you learn faster, how you also learn how to create growth and healing in the world around you. It's this moment. What's happened is completely uninteresting. Everything is available this moment because it hasn't kind of happened yet. It hasn't crystallized yet. So think of the current moment, nothing has crystallized. It crystallizes based on the definitions that is being introduced through every being, each moment. And we choose to repeat the same intentions, the same thoughts, the same emotions, the same stories, the same everything. So we crystallize something that is not crystallized. And we do the same thing again and again and again. So the frames look exactly the same with minimal variations, although you can change everything. So if you think of going back and changing something, you can change everything now. And that's what we need to learn. This is a part of spiritual awakening, is learn to be present now. This is the only moment that exists. And it has eternal consequences. So it's all here. It's all that matters. How time expresses itself is the result and the consequence of your consciousness and presence in the moment. So how laws of nature operate, it's simply, again, the result and the echo of your presence. So in many ways, it's completely uninteresting. But it's interesting as a rendering. This is the thing, when you go from living in a simulation to being the one creating it, you understand that, oh, right, I just see the echo, real time, of my own exact point of consciousness and evolution. So I just get the information and I change. I make choices, I create. So I then just use this rendering that I get back several times a second to say, okay, did it work? Okay, I need to do more of that, I need to do more of that. So we then begin to use this kind of like real-time rendering to take control, to go in and learn and see, where are my weaknesses? Where do I need to study? How can I change it? Did it work? When I apply this to other people, other spaces, does it work? So we do it and we become better at it, right? But utilizing this moment is all that matters.
All right. It seems like that's all of our questions for tonight. So to you, IKYA, for a wrap-up.
Good. Now, working with the model of a simulation is the only intelligent way of kind of dealing with this. It's a huge step forward for our culture. It's not, we've lived in the understanding that kind of came from religion and then has been part of science as well, this kind of more fatalistic view. When we adopt the model of a simulation, we begin to understand the possibilities, right? And how much is actually there and how we can utilize it, right? Because all simulations would have a purpose, right? So it can help humans connect more, like, what's the point of this? Because it's definitely not to satisfy a God and to be judged. It's none of that. It's a training facility. It's education for you to become an absolute master in everything, for you to learn how to fly your airplane and crash as much as you want, and over time you stop doing that and you focus on flying instead, over and over again, and you get better. This is what spiritual work is about, right? And it's learning to want to fly and say, what can I do with that? It's that exploration, it's that joy. And truly kind of embrace, I said, the idea that this is safe. This is a training ground. We all want you to succeed. We all want you to grow and heal. It's why we are here, right? So we can grow past fear. We can grow past suffering. And also logically understand that in a simulation model, there cannot be judgment, right? There cannot be eternal punishment. It will only be encouragement and new chances, new opportunities forever, right? Because we all want you to succeed. Everything in you, every particle, every string, it will have to reach fullness at some point. Your entire spiritual evolution will come to an end at some point, and this is where you do it. One finger at a time, right? One lifetime at a time. But you build complexity in yourself. You build spiritual awareness. So play around with it, right? After tonight, try to keep this kind of conversation in your mind for the next few days and just experiment. What are the full consequences of this when I use this model to understand how the universe works? Play around with it and see how it opens up. Your mind can set you free from how humans historically have looked at the world and the purpose. It opens, playfulness, infinite opportunities and possibilities and that it can set you free, right? It can allow you to feel that you have chosen to come here to play and to study, that life is supportive, it's encouraging, right? And that you have so many talents, and that we're all rooting for you. This is why we have all these dimensions and universes and places and life forms, so you can get exactly what you need at any given time. Your job is to be present and to work hard and play hard and to be absolutely everything you can possibly be every moment. And if you crash the plane, no harm done. It's just a simulation.
Thank you so much, IKYA. Tonight's episode, just a warm encouragement. Tonight's episode, though quite complex at times, is really fundamental to how we all live our lives. And so we warmly encourage you to really share this episode widely with anyone who might benefit, because it's really about the physics of life, and everyone can benefit from it. So please do share, like tonight's episode, share it, subscribe to IKYA.official here on YouTube and on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And thank you so much for being with us, for contributing to tonight's conversation. And we do look forward to seeing you next Monday at 19 o'clock Oslo time for IKYA Live.